Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. This is Antoine Bandelay, your resident geek, giving you all things theories and discussion for Avatar: The Last Airbender. Today is a special episode. Really, it's a way because I just get this topic on my channel all the time, and I'm kind of like over it, and I just want to have a space to be like, here, just look at this thing, look at this discussion. This is like all my thoughts on it. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And the funny catalyst to this is because of, as you can see, I am joined by two others here. A lot of you should be familiar with them. Of course, we have MattCMG and AirSpeedPrime. I was going to make a video that was titled "The Legend of Korra is Overhated," and I was in the process of like scripting that, and then freaking Matt just like dumps a 4-hour freaking masterpiece, illustrating
What's
every
funny
point.
about
Oh,
that is
just about.
what's funny about that is as I was making it, I'm like, somebody else is gonna do this first. Somebody else has to have done this first. It's gonna happen. It's my biggest fear with making long videos like that. Is I'm always afraid somebody else is gonna do it before me.
But go ahead and introduce yourself. For people who do not know you, go ahead.
I'm MattCMG. I make videos. That's it.
And then Morgan, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Morgan. AirSpeedPrime is the name of my YouTube channel. I pretty much cover everything like Avatar, Korra, and yeah, I like Korra. At the moment, I'm going through the new novel that just came out, Legacy of Yang Chen, doing a video on like every single chapter. So that's basically what I'm doing at the moment, going over the recent content that came out.
Awesome. Yeah. If you guys, in particular, like Airspeed literally does everything. Like if there's like a pre-order that's or a shift in dates or something on somewhere, like he's the one who's gonna let you know like right away. Oh, is that a special edition of a?
No, this is a physical audiobook, physical media audiobook.
They still have those?
Yeah.
Those exist?
CDs, yeah.
Oh my god.
The rare merch.
Yeah, the rare. I mean, you have like all the rare merch, like literally all of it. So yes, briefly gonna introduce. So yeah, we're discussing today why the Legend of Korra is often overlooked and underestimated in comparison to its predecessor, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Gonna talk about like a few things. I feel like with Legend of Korra in particular, I feel like it was just a bad taste. I just never really got washed out, and I think a lot of that had to do with the first half of the series and people kind of keeping that and then going forward and not also giving it a fair shake in terms of like the way that they even interacted with it. But we're gonna go over all that and all that. So the first thing we'll talk about is like the differences in tone and themes. For sure, I would say, and you guys can say like you disagree if you want, that Korra tackled more complex and mature themes. It was pretty much straightforward with Airbender, with it being the hero's journey. You see the progression fantasy that happens, with the training of Aang and fighting the one big bad, versus Korra, which was more of a mini series. Or really, it was supposed to just be just that first one, the one with the Mon, and they thought, okay, it's going to be a one-off, sort of a thing, but turned into a bigger series. And I think that's actually one of its strengths, is that it does deal with these different ideologies each and every season, so you get to go into that. But a detraction would be is that it didn't have as many episodes as, say, Last Airbender did, so it couldn't have some of those like deep character cuts. You couldn't really get the Kuvira alone episode that we were supposed to get in season 4. Like that one got replaced by the Remembrance episode and such. But in terms of tone and theme for you guys, how did you interact with Korra initially? Did you ever have like any issue with it when it initially came out, or yeah, what are your general thoughts on that?
When it first came out, I was 12, so I was like,
what was I?
As a child, I was like, I was all about it because you're a child, you don't really have standards. I was a big Avatar head as a kid, obviously, and then like, oh, this is just more of that. I like that. And then season 2 came out, and then I remember falling off of it for whatever reason after that. But then I eventually watched it like years later in full. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is more. There's more to this than I thought there was.
Yeah, I think I was very private at that time of my viewing of Korra, and that I wasn't even like part of any like online space or whatever, so I never really heard about any of this discourse or the divisiveness that was in the fandom until like I started making YouTube videos, and I'm like, oh, what, y'all didn't like Korra? like I didn't, like, for me in my mind I was always like, oh yeah, I like the Airbender better or whatever, but I never like by any stretch, because I feel like sometimes people put it in the same ballpark as like the Star Wars prequel trilogies, or like when they talk about the love triangle, like Twilight is like it's a much better love triangle, that happened in that first book than Twilight. It shouldn't be anywhere near like the prequel trilogy and how people were like reacting to it, and making it out to be like it's really like orderly done to the point where it's like on the trash tier. And I was like, wait, what? Like that didn't make me. What about you, Morgan? Like in terms of tone and theme and differences, did you have any like
Uh,
when you first saw it?
what was it like? I was 20 when it came out, so like I was like right on the kind of forefront of fandom, like helping to run like a fan site, like doing the podcast stuff like that. So it was right there, kind of like doing content basically for it. Um, at least like on our site, like things were always like relatively positive, and I think that's why like the site that we had was like pretty good about that. Definitely, yeah, like in and around book two, I think onwards, yeah, you started to see more of the kind of negativity come in. Um, of course, like there was always like a sense for like there was a group of people that always liked it the whole way through. It remained popular, but like the negativity did definitely build up as it went on, and probably like peaked in the like year or two after Korra ended, honestly. But I don't remember it being like super crazy bad during the run of Korra. I think it was just sort of like some of those initial super popular like YouTube videos that hit right after everything ended during that kind of era of YouTube where hating on everything was the big thing.
Right. I mean, also that people are realizing that now in today's age is like that's what sells better, and that I think that also could be part of it, because whenever you, or at least in my experience, like at least in real life or when I have real interactions with Avatar fans, there's not the same vitriol for Legend of Korra as you hear on like some like online Reddit post or whatever it might be. And also, I want to make a note, because someone here said in the comments, I don't like the whole new Korra love by the media either. It's almost as if the new projects come up, marketing changes, public perception. Same thing happened with Barbie. That I want to make sure very clear, especially at the beginning of this discussion, that is not what, at least what I am trying to do, because I don't think you should go on the other end and just be like, oh no, it has no flaws. That's not what any of us are saying. None of us are saying that it's like a flawless piece at all. I think most core fans will tell you like, oh yeah, it got some issues with it, but still very much enjoyed it. And it seems like the people who have that very deep hate for whatever reason want you also to have that same feeling. And it's like, well, sorry, I like it. Yeah, you have it, and we'll talk about like the individual issues and stuff like that as we discuss it today. And there's certain things that I think I'm even just with you guys on. Because even in your video, Matt, I think there was a certain point where I was like, oh, actually, that didn't really matter to me. But I want to make that very clear. This is not like oh no, let's give all the love to Korra, that especially like on every single thing. Like, oh yeah, no, they did nothing wrong at all. Like, no, of course not. Yeah, let's try to be rational and even filter with it. But character growth, let's talk about that. Character growth and development. A huge thing for this story was that Korra was supposed to be anti-Aang, basically. Like, that's straight up said in the Art of the Animation book. That's what Mike and Brian were specifically going for. They always want to tell new stories and different stories, which I always appreciated about them, and the way that they approach stories. For you guys, was it when you saw that Korra was already had the elements, when she was a kid, a little hothead, what were your feelings on her when she first was coming out in book 1 and book 2?
Um, like I always liked the idea, because like I know people like wanted Korra to do the whole element journey and so on, but like I think nearly all basically all stories with Avatar, they never spent too much time focusing on characters training and stuff like that, because like Aang learning earthbending and stuff like that, it does come down to the point of like there's a philosophy to each element, and the martial arts training they're never going to focus on like too much. And so like especially like post book 1, when people are asking for and have her go on a journey to get the other elements back, and it's like she already knows the philosophy of the element, she already knows the martial art, like it's kind of a purely technical thing where she doesn't have the elements now. So I always liked that they did that, and just literally just did the reverse of Aang, where he needed 3 elements, she needed 1, but she also needed to do the spiritual growth, and that was perfectly fine for me jumping in that way. In terms of like other stuff like Yang Chen novels, she has all the elements already, and I don't feel that the book is worse because we didn't see her train in all of them, because her training ultimately would be somewhat similar to other characters' training.
That might have been the expectation too, because I know that's a big thing too. Is like the expectations of what people wanted versus what came out of it. I think there was a shock, right? Because people were thinking, "Oh, we're getting another Avatar series. What's Aang doing as an adult?" And they're like, "Wait, what? What? He's dead? Wait, what? It's this new girl? Like, wait, what?" So I understand that, like, that's like an ice bucket over your head, a shock of having to deal with it, because not really. And someone mentioned this in my comments, I think yesterday, that it is very much a spin-off series, not a sequel. Yes, it's kind of like sort of a sequel because you have some overlapping characters, but it's more so a spin-off than it is a sequel. And it's kind of establishing this new basis of, hey, that story was told, and now we're telling like another thing. I'm getting ahead of myself with expectations. Sorry, Matt. I didn't let you talk about like the changes of Korra or how different she was in tone.
I don't really.
Or character development, I should say.
Yeah, well, character development. That's a big one. That was like a huge. I made a huge point in my video to point that out because like it's just so central to the show, and I genuinely don't understand how people don't see it. I don't know. I don't even know how to word it. I kind of worded it better in the video, honestly, but it's just like it's the most important thing in the show. It's
right
front and center. So I don't know how people don't see it. Not to be like being facetious right off the bat or being what is it? What's the word? Debate word, something like that. You know what I mean?
Dismissive, is that what you're looking for?
But it's the funny thing about that too, about her character development early on, because she's supposed to be this kind of recluse almost, because she's been stuck in the White Lotus camp in the South forever. And I think they could have actually even played up that a little bit more. I think she kind of like integrated with Republic City like kind of easily. There was like some awkward stuff with she wasn't sure about the money, like what I have to pay for like this freaking the jerky stick that she was trying to get. But socially, I think they could have played with that a little bit more, because if you have someone who is just being overly protected for 16 years of her life, and then all of a sudden she's thrust to like this other social world, and also she needs to be an avatar, in that she has to be this mediator between all of these personalities. And I wish we saw more of the failing of that, because it got more into like plot of like the fighting and combat, and like Amon being like which I did enjoy. I remember you making that point too, is that each foil each season is something that Korra has to deal with. And in that first one, she really enjoys that she's really good at bending, and that's like the thing that Amon can take away. And I think they did a really good job with that with all the villains, and making a good foil for whatever that next iteration of her journey was going to be.
Yeah, it's definitely got those fish out of water vibes at first, for sure. They could have definitely gone deeper with that.
And you mentioned that too, and I actually agree. I think more episodes would have been helpful to have some of the stuff going in, because one of the big components, and I'll do like a direct comparison now, would be the team avatars on each. And for me, it's definitely weaker in Legend of Korra, and it's really good. I'm so glad you pointed out, because I thought I was the only one who like noticed that during the it was in book 3 when they were doing the stakeout, when they were looking for where Ai Wei went, right? Because he went to the was it the Misty Palms Oasis, or no, that was another it was right.
Yeah.
And then you see them just hanging out and like talking interplay. You see Asami playing oh my goodness, Paisho, I think with the Bolin. And you're like, whoa, yes, can we see like more of this, like them? Because when they do it, it's very nice. And not so much to say that hey, they should always be on a journey all the time. Like, yeah, have their individual things. I like how they kind of broke up, for that 4-year period, and then rekindled it in book 4. But I do feel that it was lacking. Like that was one of the components I feel like in Legend of Korra that definitely lacked was the friend group. How do you guys feel about the friend group or team Avatar?
Like I like all the characters. I think that's the big thing. Like I think some of them are well developed, some of them aren't kind of well developed. So of the main 4, like I think Korra and Bolin are probably the best developed. Mako kind of got decent stuff early on, but then really faded off. And then Asami, for me, ends up kind of being the weakest, because they kind of gave her like biggest monumental moment in one of her first episodes, in episode 7, when she like sides with her friends over her father. And then the only other like I suppose super notable thing is then the book 4 like reunion with Hiroshi type stuff. And like yes, there's the like setup for Korrasami and other little bits and pieces, but in terms of like getting to know Asami as the character of Asami, I definitely wish we had more time to do that. I wish Mako was treated better in kind of like the second half of the show, even into the comics. I wish he was treated a little bit better, which is why there's kind of so much like
Are they having
anticipation
a
for.
Mako comic coming out? Isn't he supposed to have a one shot?
It's a confusing situation.
Okay.
He's going to be the focus of some sort of a comic. We don't know if it's a one shot or if it's a full on trilogy, but he's going to be in it in some way.
Okay. I had a thought about that too. About the friend group. Yeah. And also like the book one love triangle stuff. I actually never had that big of an issue with it. I didn't think it was that as people try to make it out as like really horrendous. Yeah, it might have been weaker. And I actually believe that romance in all of Avatar is pretty weak, except for Kyoshi. By the way, I'm gonna say this again. I say this in every video. Read the Kyoshi books. Goddammit. Read the fucking Kyoshi books. That is where the first time I felt like romance was like completely done, like 100%, like great. I had no issues, no qualms with it whatsoever. But in terms of the love triangle, the part that I have issue with the love triangle stuff was in book 2. I feel like that's where it got kind of messy, particularly the Asami Mako like rekindling sort of a thing, and then him not being honest with the amnesia Korra. That part I felt like okay, that was bad look, man. But prior to that, I never like every time I hear like one of these critiques, I'm like, but that didn't really like just killed it for you like entirely. Like it didn't. How did you guys feel about the love triangle in book 1 and 2?
I always thought it was the weakest part of the season for sure. Well, I guess books 1 and 2, so both seasons. But my biggest gripe with it is just it's so melodramatic. Like in Avatar, for example, the romance stuff is always like, you know, it feels like how a kid would feel. Like it does feel like when Aang fumbles the bag with Katara, for example, you know, you feel for him because you understand how you would feel when you were a kid, and that feels like it's, you know, the end of the world. But like when you're a teenager, it's always heightened. So I feel like they trying to go for that vibe, but it just kind of felt wrong. You know what I mean? It kind of felt like a CW show a little bit in like a bad way.
Yeah.
That was
I don't think anyone ever says CW show and then says compliment afterwards. Like,
yeah. In the middle of all the drama, they kind of lost sight of like, well, do the characters actually like care about each other? They're in a relationship with each other. Are we addressing how they actually like feel, given that they're now in a romantic relationship? And that's kind of what got lost in all of it, because it was more about chopping and changing who likes who and creating those type of dynamics, rather than wait, Mako and Asami kind of have a bit of a connection over this on their first date, and that's really all that their relationship is. And then we switch over to, oh, Bolin likes Korra because of this. Like you said, Antoine, I've never had a problem with it because I don't think it like kind of takes up enough kind of minutes of the season to be such a huge negative factor. But it is probably the weakest overall part of the book, kind of thematically. Because like episode 5, where like most of it takes place, I actually think is a pretty well written episode, because it like incorporates the probe ending into it, and the relationships affect how they are in the arena. And then they actually like sort of at least resolve it okay. But I agree that book 2 is where it goes off the rails. I think the drama focused romance stuff.
So in terms of book 1, I'm trying to think of right now, what if you guys can remember, what are the critiques that are levied on book 1? I'm trying to like recall. I know one part, and something that I would probably agree with too, is the reveal of Amon as a bloodbender. Because at first I thought, like, literally when he resisted Tarlok, I was like, yo, this guy is like S tier, like chi blocker of some sort. Like, what is going on? Like my I did not at that point think, oh man, he's a bloodbender for sure. I know that people have a critique of the bloodbending aspect of that season, and how Korra got her bending at the end. That one I will agree I had a little bit of an issue with, and then her getting her bending from her past lives as well. But it just doesn't kill it for me. Like it doesn't like destroy because I feel like the lead up to that, like, so much gets underappreciated, like the fight scenes in the show, the music, the animation, even the voice acting. I don't know. Some people give credit for the voice acting, but because there's always like this, like, oh, all things we don't like, you kind of like miss out on like all this really good stuff that's layered in. How did you guys feel about the bloodbending, Amon reveal, Korra getting her bending back? Like, I think most of people's issues are in those like last 2 to 3 episodes of the book 1.
I've always liked the bloodbending reveal because I like that, like, we have that kind of Sokka moment where he kind of reveals basically the idea of like special unique benders, and he actually makes that like an actual kind of terminology in a way within the universe of like, oh, combustion bending, like psychic lava, psychic blood bending are these specialized abilities that can randomly pop up. So I thought that was a good way to kind of highlight that and explain, like, kind of retroactively explain some of the odd abilities from the first show, and then set the stage for, oh, and we can do more with this. I never really had a problem with the use of blood bending because it made sense to be this extremely overpowered ability that is confined to this one bloodline. For me, the problem is just that, like, it's not explained very well within the show, the details of what happened. Specifically when it comes to, like, they don't explain what Amon's bloodbending technique is in terms of how it takes away bending. But they had an explanation kind of like in the background, and like they revealed it in like interviews and stuff like that. So I just wish they'd incorporated it into the show. Even some of the other little details, like, oh, the reason he's able to sort of, as a non-bender, defeat all the benders.
Right.
It's such a subtle explanation, right? Like Mako
does
has
it
a
in
really
like the
vague
prison,
mention.
yeah, like super like blinking you miss it type situation. Yeah.
Yeah, a vague kind of like surprise reveal of like, oh, he like secretly psychically bloodbends people to redirect their attacks off target. I could have just used a little bit more explanation. I understand they don't like to get overly technical, but they just left it completely unexplored.
Like the anime moment where you like freeze and he's like, oh, he's stopping my bending. He's, you know, like he
Yeah,
shifted me
yeah.
to the inch one.
Yeah, but like I think Katara should have been able to be like, oh, your bending is blocked by something I can't reverse.
Right.
Because I'm not a powerful bloodbender. There's no full moon, and even if there was a moon, I couldn't reverse this bloodbending type thing. Like that's to me the explanation that they probably should have done.
And then Korra getting her bending back from her past lives. How'd you feel about that at the end?
I think it's story-wise and character-wise, it's terrible. But the vibes are there. I love the vibes. I love like the Avatar theme swelling. The Aang reveal is awesome. Story-wise, it doesn't make any sense. It's not good. Because the whole point of the season is Korra learning that her bending is not the only thing that defines her as the Avatar. And then to kind of, for her to having lost that, losing a literal part of herself, that should be like a big emotional moment for her that we should really be lingering on. But then you know, oh, here, have it back now, no consequences. It's very reductive from what the.
That's actually funny because in the next season you have all the consequences, you know, but in a very different manner. Yeah, for me, I mean, I didn't like it in the same way that even going forward already, but like in book 2 where like the airbender started popping up, you know, because of harmonic convergence. I was always like, yeah, really? Okay, I'll go with it though, because then we get like Zahir and we get all this other like cool storyline. It's similar feelings I have for the end of book 1 where she gets it back. I'm like, yeah, that wasn't like, but I it's not enough for me to be like, I'm going to dismiss it like, no, whole cloth. Because yeah, I like how you said vibes, because I think that Korra in particular is more of a vibe show than Airbender is, because every time I watch through it and think back on it, I always think about it like fondly, or even when I'm experiencing it, like as I'm experiencing the show, I'm like, yeah, this is like a good time. But then you think about certain things, you're like, oh yeah, that didn't really work, that didn't quite work, you know, when you like start like unpacking it. But being in the moment with Korra always feels good. Like always like, and that's something you can't really like pinpoint or discern, right? It's just the feeling, like all the things working together. That I feel, and also lightning bending, something I want to touch on too, because I know that's another critique that people have besides like the blood bending in book 1, and that they're like, lightning bending's too easy now. But like I was like, that makes like sense though, because it was held. I mean, at least it's like a fan theory. I don't think this was ever confirmed in lore. I don't think that it was
in the lore. I feel like
that it was stuck within the royal families. Is that it? Morgan would know. Morgan, do you know if that's like a in lore kind of thing, that it's been stuck in the royal family, that ability?
Yeah, like, I think the Kyoshi novels touch on it. It's kind of like, it's not specifically the Fire Nation royal family, but like people who develop it know it's a rare ability and sort of keep knowledge of how to perform it secret. So it's always been a relatively, you know, secretive thing. But then there's like the implication that like the royal family is almost like hunting down lightning benders to incorporate it into their kind of lineage, and obviously then they keep it a secret. But as we sort of know, it can kind of pop up all over the place to a certain degree.
Yeah, and then once it's trained, I'm like, yeah, if someone can train it, it's fine. Like I don't feel like it loses the specialness of lightning bending. I mean, and then then you have that critique, but then I think you even mentioned this in your video too, Matt. But then like metal bending doesn't get the same sort of critique, and then because you have an entire police force who's using this new element,
Yeah.
and that's a big thing too. I feel like a lot of the critique isn't always consistent. Like you'll have a critique on one end, but then in that same thing will happen, for something else. Case in point would be something like the Deus Ex Machina that Aang got, literally. Like a literal Deus Ex Machina. A god gave you powers to solve your problem at the end, and people don't they kind of wave that away, or they're like, that's good. I love Aang, so I'm not gonna levy any kind of critique on it. But then when it comes to Korra, like that same, I just want what I'm just advocating for is just same energy. Just keep the same energy, throughout. All right, well, book 2. Now that one's there's a lot to unpack on book 2. What's the main one that we can get into? I guess beginnings.
That's probably a good starting point.
Right? Yeah, beginnings. I loved it. I remember really enjoying beginnings when I first initially watched it, and I didn't really have an issue because I know the big critique that people have is that it changed the fundamental meaning of Avatar when really it doesn't. And the main thing being that people say that, oh no, like they learned from the original benders. That's where they got bending from. And then I know that some people will say like, well, hey, then shouldn't Sokka get like bending if all he needs to do is just talk to Yue and hey, hook me up with some powers. When really to me what that did is it deepened it because it showed you where the source of the magic came from, but not necessarily where the martial art came from. The martial art came from the original benders. It came from the dragons. It came from the badger moles. I think you made this mention too, and I actually made a video about it as well, about the Omashu situation. The idea of it being like a fable, or it could be real history of how these two came up with the earth bending. How do you guys feel about the beginnings and how it kind of recontextualized the Avatar state, how the origins of the Avatar and all that?
I've never had a problem with it.
And I should preface too, guys. Morgan, like, if I'm not mistaken, book 2 is actually your favorite, right? Of Korra?
Yeah.
Of the series? Yes. So I want to make that very clear. Super unique opinion. So I definitely want to hear from you when we're in this part of the discussion.
Yeah, because I'm kind of known as kind of like the lore guy. So I feel like if there were problems, I would be the first one to have a major issue with them. And every time I've watched beginnings, I just don't have those problems, because at the end, like people try and say that it breaks all of this stuff. It's like heavy retconning when it's like some of the most light retconning imaginable. It's like 3 lines of dialogue from the original show, all of which is rather vague, where like Yue talks about the legend of Tui and La. The Oma and Shu's story is literally written on their tomb post their deaths. It's a legend. It's literally a legend. There's a song about the tunnel, all that sort of stuff. So I can give that retcon of oh, you worded it in a way where you said they learned earthbending from the badger moles, and we're slightly rewording that to be now they learned the martial art to make earthbending as powerful as can be from the badger moles. I don't mind that. That to me, that's a very minor retcon. The Roku Avatar State one is kind of I don't really mind like that one, because they've always referred to an existence of an Avatar spirit.
Right, and I think it's actually in book 2, and then within the library. Is that when the Avatar spirit's first mentioned? Maybe no. It was the second episode. No, it was episode 2.
Yeah,
yeah, it's really early.
Yeah, it was the Southern Air Temple. She was like, oh no, he's connecting with his heirs. I think Katara says the line with them. They just didn't have a name for it because that's what it's supposed to be. It was a lost to time name. Like Rava was not known at that point.
Yeah, so I've never had a problem with that, because they just address what we already knew, that there's another spirit. That's what the Avatar is. It's a combination of a human and a spirit. We've already known that. So what's the problem with revealing the spirit? I don't really get that. And then as we go through, I think we get some really strong lore as we go through. It's a really deep dive into the lore, whereas I'd actually say Avatar is relatively vague in a lot of its lore about the spirit world, including the episode it's introduced in. The episode is literally called The Spirit World. We don't see the spirit world in that episode. Because
he's in a weird limbo world. I didn't realize now.
Well, that's the only way to kind of make it make sense. But it's actually his spirit separated from his body, but still in the physical world.
Right.
And it's that's a vagueness in Avatar that they super solidified in Korra. They made it really clear. This is how you bring bending into the spirit world. Now, and it kind of just it's used in like all prior material after this, so like I think it works.
And what are your feelings on beginnings, Matt?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I like a lot of what it does. There's bits and pieces here and there that are kind of messy, but overall, like 99%, maybe 90, it's pretty good.
Yeah. It's always again another vibey episode too. Right, even just seeing the fusion of the first Avatar, and like that felt very anime. I remember that episode to me like felt very like a Goku, going Super Saiyan or some situation, and just like the effort that you have to put in. Like, I don't care if I'm going to potentially die. I need to like, do this thing. Like all that stuff is always very engaging for me as a viewer. And of course, Stephen Yeun, that's our boy. Like I know that you Walking Dead, like the dude, he's really good actor too. I don't know if you've seen him in some of the Jordan Peele stuff. He was just in Nope recently. Super killer performance. And then what's that other Netflix beef he just was on? Really, he's so good. So yeah, beginnings. Yeah, I don't think it breaks as much as people like. And then the other facet would be the Vatu Rava stuff. The good and evil chaos order situation, which I think, to be fair, I think some of that maybe wasn't like super well handled, in the sense that it did come off as being like a bad good dichotomy kind of a thing, when it really should be about I think you mentioned this, man. Remind me if this was one of your points, that you said that between Vatu and Rava, it's almost as if because Rava was alone for those 10,000 years, because Vatu was locked in the Tree of Time, she herself had to take the responsibility of keeping that balance of, because you can't just have order all the time, right? Because you have too stringent of order. We saw that with Kuvira. We see how bad that is. We see with chaos, too much chaos is with Zahir, how that's a bad thing too. It's supposed to be about like having that balancing act. Can you expand on that when you were mentioning that, like what your thought process is on what Rava was doing in that 10,000 years, and how either she was trying to maintain that balance, or how she might have created an imbalance because of that spirit being gone?
Yeah, so like I think part of the reason for why people view Rava and Vatu as like the whole objectively good and evil thing, right, is partially because they are very imbalanced, like inherently, in the way that they're written and the way that they're treated. When I've obviously, I don't think that was the intention by Mike and Brian. Like the intention behind them is still there. Like they're very clearly meant to be like this yin and yang type thing, but the way they're written isn't very consistent with that, with how they should be. And I think that's partially because a lot of people view them as inherently being those things, when in reality they have their own like thoughts and opinions and make their own decisions, because they're like sentient beings. When it's not it's not that they represent these things, it's that they make the conscious decision to go either for their thing, like Vatu makes the conscious decision to go all in with chaos, whereas Rava makes the conscious decision to be like, all right, I got to represent both of us here. So I think that's part of where that comes in, and part of the misunderstanding of it. But like, again, I can't be like too forgiving of it, because it's not really written that way. It's implied, but it's not there, which is kind of the biggest issue with it.
And I think I think you made a big point about it too in your video, is that a lot of stuff is implied, because if you actually like sit down and like negotiate what's going on, you can figure it out. But it's not like an over like one-time viewing. Oh yeah, I get like all of that stuff. Like you can understand when some of those misunderstandings happen with the lore-based material in book 2. Did I already ask you, Morgan? Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't know if I asked with that.
Yeah, like I've never really minded that aspect of it, because like an era of the Avatar, like that's what the last 10,000 years have been. It's not been like all light.
Right.
Like darkness is allowed to rise.
That was all the part with Juan when he died. He was like, "Oh, sorry, I couldn't like do it. Everybody still sucks."
Yeah, like darkness is allowed to rise in an era of light, but like, is it the same the other way? That's kind of like the point, is that like they characterize like Batu as being like he's chaos, but he specifically chooses to go for like evil chaos. There's a way to do it in a way where it maybe represents more freedom, but like Batu as a character chooses to be the most evil version of himself. Whereas of course we see Rava has the more like direct opposition to that initially, and they just roll around the world destroying it effectively during their battle while they're conjoined. But she learns from Juan like to do things more in kind of like his way, and actually like that's what Wan represents. You know, he actually formed relationships with spirits and kind of showed the world kind of the way to a certain degree. So I've never really minded that too much, because I think some people do have the tendency to place too much of like the character of spirits on like what they are the spirit of, rather than like they are actually a character. Like Wan Shi Tong isn't just like a computer. He's a character and makes decisions, and like sometimes it's good, sometimes it's wrong.
And yeah, he went back and forth too. You know, even about how he felt about humans, and you know. I actually like this idea, like the idea of like Twee and Law and Vaatu and Rava. Although obviously we don't get as much on Twee and Law. Obviously, like they don't ever have like a conversation. We only see like, you know, the Koizilla situation, and then, you know, Twee being re-emerged into like the moon. And I don't even know. I mean, I guess you could say like the Koizilla was the destructive force, and then the moon. But even that's vague. Like you were saying earlier, Matt, it's vague. Like a lot of the lore based stuff in Airbender is vague, which might be better because then you allow the viewer to plant their own ideas. And I think that's what happened, because there was, how much time was it between Korra and Airbender? 4 years? Was it 08 and then 2012?
Wait.
Or did it end in 20? No, it ended in 2005. No, it ended in 2008.
Oh, like in real life,
right?
Okay.
Oh, no, sorry. Not,
oh yeah, 4 years, 2008 to 2012.
Right. So in that time period, there's a lot of time for fans to create their own, you know, albeit like their headcanon, but like how they rationalize the world. And then when they get like this answer, it's like, that wasn't the answer I had in my head. I can understand how that can be sometimes frustrating. I know I had that issue with a lot of Star Wars, because there's always a lot of breaks between the big movies for those. And you have like these things in your mind that you want. But yeah, I don't think even Twee and Law were that deep in terms of it being a representation of yin and yang. I think it was vague. I don't know how you guys felt about those two.
Yeah. And that's one of the more confusing lore aspects. Like, why is water the only one where it's like the bending even existing in the first place hinges upon a spirit's connection to like a celestial object in the moon? Like, why is that? Like, is there a sun spirit that, like, if the sun ever went out, firebending wouldn't work? And, you know, is there an equivalent spirit for each element? That is a bit of a weird dynamic that they roughly explain with, like, you know, those two spirits came over in the beginning. You know, I'd like, okay, I guess they're related to the creation of the world, and that's why the tides exist in the first place. But I guess that's it, like creation myth stuff, you know.
Right. But yeah, I get it. I mean, that's always a choice too. Like, as a creator, is how much do you want to explain your world? How much do you want it to be soft magic? How much do you want it to be hard magic? You know, and which times are better for you know, which component. Okay, wait. So we did beginnings. We talked about Vaatu, Rava. I mean, the other big thing would be, I guess, the finale of book 2, because we already touched on like the love triangle stuff. How we all were like, not the best, not our favorite. Yeah, I guess it'll be the finale. Now, this is the huge thing I know that Morgan has like defended, in that like he has no issue with the Genora stuff and like, you know, the lightning beam stuff. I don't necessarily have an issue with like I know some people just out of pocket would just be like, lightning beams, I hate it, you know, like and anime stuff, you know. Like, that part I don't care so much for, as much as I guess it would have just been different. I don't even know what ending I would have like preferred on it. But Morgan, what is it that worked so well for you in terms of like that ending moment with the spiritual battle?
Well, it's because like the stakes are at their most high, like in the entire franchise during book 2. Like, literally the fate of the world for the next 10,000 years is at stake. I think they have permission to go as big as possible, in my mind. And like, we've already done big giant things with Koizilla, so I don't really have a problem with like a more powerful.
Oh yeah, that's
spirit,
true.
like,
what is the difference between Koizilla and what was going on there? What do you guys feel like the key difference of that? Like, I'm trying to think. Like, yeah, because
one's in Avatar.
The same. We said one's in Avatar.
Yep.
One's in Avatar. One's in Korra.
Tell me I'm wrong.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, equal opportunity here, or equal criticism. Yeah, because I never really heard that argument before. Like, why is it that it's giving credit the Koizilla stuff, but not like, you know, Unavatu, Korra spirit stuff? Which, Matt, I think you mentioned that about the astral projection stuff and it being like an airbending ability, and how that never really like came about like in how it should have been.
That would have been so much better of an explanation. I would have been like 10 times more cool with it. I am cool with it as it is, I guess, because I kind of have to be. But if
I'm
they
the
had
same way
like
with like Airbenders coming back, I'm like, I have to be okay with it. But also, I'm cool with it because like
you
you can
kind of
use that
have to
here
be at a certain point. But like, I feel like that airbending explanation would have made way more sense than whatever this tree of time thing is that they just pull out of
for
nowhere.
those who aren't familiar with the idea, can you explain what the idea of the projection and
so in book 2, when Korra unlocks the giant spirit thing, she's like astral projecting her spirit, but she's like, it only works because it's during harmonic convergence and in the tree of time, which is like, it's like over explained for no reason.
Which is what Tenzin explains to her. But you were thinking, well, hey, Tenzin being the airbender, man, he should be.
Yeah, I thought it would have made way more sense, and it would have actually tied like other pieces of the season together and kind of like brought everything full circle, like thematically. If instead of like, oh, if you sit in the tree of time, it gives you magic powers. He was like, yo, we have this airbending technique where you can like astral project. You can do that maybe if you do that during harmonic convergence, it works better. Because you're the avatar,
which is almost what Jinora does, in a way. I mean,
and that would tie in too, because like that would explain what Jinora is doing, since that's kind of like not really explained. She's like, why? Okay, she can astral project. I get that she's got a spiritual connection. Why does she become like this angel of light who like reveals Vatu or like Rava inside? Like, how does she have the power to do that? It doesn't really it's never explained. It doesn't make any sense. But if they had done some explanation, like, oh, airbenders can astral project, that's a thing they can do. And since it's during harmonic convergence, it's going to be powerful. So any airbender who can do it better. That would explain why Jinora is doing what she's doing. That would explain how Korra's doing what she's doing. And it would make perfect sense, and it wouldn't like devalue anything, because they're the only like airbenders around really that can do that technique. So I thought it would have made way more sense especially in terms of Tenzin's character, because it would be like he's speaking from what he knows rather than this ancient thing he has no reason to know about.
Right.
So I don't know.
So yeah, just explanation
makes more
stuff.
sense.
Yeah. Oh, and another thing I did not enjoy in book 2 was most of what was going on with Bolin. I feel like they didn't really know what to do with Bolin for a lot of that, having him the net tuck stuff, and then the relationship he had with with Deska, and then what was really bizarre to me was at the end when it seemed like, I think it was when they were running away and they had just gotten away because he made that big speech about loving her and stuff like that. And then Mako's like, "Oh man, I really believed you. Like great job getting us out of that situation." He's like, "I actually meant it." I was like, "Wait, what? You meant what? You really like this woman? Like how? Like that always." And again, I already said this. Like romance was always like been like for me, but I don't know how you guys felt about Bolin and Deska, or just Bolin in general.
I think Bolin gets like a really strong hero moment, like the moment where he gets to fight in the arena when everyone's watching and they kind of like line it up with the mover. I think is like a really strong like moment of him truly like becoming a hero. But yeah, like it is a bit odd what they do with him, but like at least it sets up like the connection of him and Varric, and they have a bit of an arc, like the arguments between him and Mako, and like while Mako has his bad moment where he's like, framed, Bolin is in the ascendancy, but then he has to turn it around, and they kind of end up making both brothers' arcs kind of work reasonably well. But yeah, the relationship stuff, I don't hate Eska and Bolin, but like it is like weird because they very much played up for comedy, but like it's alluding to some kind of like not sure I'm super cool. Yeah, not sure I'm cool with that, but they resolve it okay. That like they don't continue with it, and I think that was the right choice. We're like, oh, we got caught up in the moment, and they have a little bit of a connection going for it.
The ending of them parting, I thought was nice. Like that felt like there was some maturity there of them like being like, hey, yeah, no, probably shouldn't be together. But I just felt it was weird that it had to come from Desna rather than it coming from Bolin. Understanding that, because then I think that would help with his arc, because it feels like Bolin's always he's a people pleaser, right? And I feel like he kind of like reverted back to that, and sometimes like, I kind of want him to stand up for himself, which is a little bit of like in book 4. Transitioning, so there's another critique that's been levied in book 2, and that people are like, they made Aang a bad dad, which is the one that probably makes me like the most like frustrated, because it's like, no, they made him a very realistic parent in a very realistic situation, or maybe not realistic situation, obviously, but like, if you are the last airbender and you had 2 children, one who was a non-bender and then the other one was a waterbender, and then you have this third kid who's like, oh, I got my airbender. And I like how Matt, you mentioned that there's like a fan theory that the avatars, their images in the spirit world are them at their greatest achievement, and people would assume, oh, why is it not like Kid Aang when he like defeated Ozai? And it's like, oh no, it's probably adult Aang, because that's when he birthed Tenzin, because that was him like, you know, being able to have airbenders, you know, be back in the world. If you as a parent, I think you got to like give more credit to like being it's very hard to be a parent, especially a parent of multiple children. Even in a regular scenario of just, you know, oh, I have to give attention to all my kids. But if you're in a situation where you are the last of a kind and you have this kid that you need to train, I think it's okay that he spent more time with that kid. And it's not an intentional neglect. It wasn't like he was like, I hate you, Boomy and Kaya. Like, no, it's that, you know, Aang would not do that. But it's a natural thing for someone to have their attention honed in that specific scenario. How do you guys feel about the Aang's a bad dad, you know, situation?
I think it's actually pretty interesting in the sense that like that is kind of a somewhat common trope these days, especially with like legacy media where we're having like sequels and reboots and revivals or whatever. That's like a weirdly common trope that I've seen where it's like, oh, this character from the original thing is actually a bad parent or whatever. Like for whatever reason they just like to do that. I don't know why.
Han Solo, Leia.
Yeah, like Han Solo, Leia. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but like it's a pretty common thing. But this is like one of the tamest examples of that.
Right, that's the thing
so,
about
like,
it.
I don't understand the vitriol.
The criticism levy just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, yeah, I actually do agree with it with with Luke and like yeah, why would you not give your nephew a chance? Why would you like about the lightsaber him? But with Aang, like there's reasons for it. Like there's reasons for why, you know, that would develop, and yeah, it just never made sense to me. I don't, Morgan, I don't know how you felt about Aang being a poor parent.
Yeah, like I don't get why people blow it out of proportion. Like it's just like Aang is not a perfect father is what I always say.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what they present there, and it's just that like ultimately we see Kai and Boomy turned out okay.
Right.
Like they dealt with some kind of lingering issues that they didn't explore when they were kids. They come up, they get past them, they grow, they're together again. Like Kaya is more involved with the airbender side of things now. Like once we get through book 2, Boomy is an airbender now and has a kind of better connection. Tenzin has a better kind of view of himself after this book to be a better kind of leader of these kind of people. Yes, like yeah, I understand why people are like, oh, that's a bit bad when you see it framed in that way. But like you said, it's a pretty crazy situation where like they're trying to keep a kind of people alive.
Like a whole entire culture.
Yeah, and effectively like one of like 4 in the world. Like they're trying to keep that alive. So giving that focus, I think, is good. And then like we see in like other material that like it's not all bad. Like the maybe slight issue here that they probably could have fixed it with was just having maybe more scenes where they allude to Aang in a positive light. But like you get that with Kaya where she mentions that like, oh yeah, like when I discovered my sexuality, like I talked about it with Aang.
And he was like, okay, completely open on it. It's all good.
Yeah, and people act like Kaya specifically like hates Aang.
Right,
and that's the way people frame it, but like that's not the takeaway, like at all.
They were just frustrated in the times that like maybe they went off on like a bison, and he was like, hey, I'm gonna teach you how to like, you know, do this airbending technique, and like sometimes we just wanted to hang out with that. It's like that's just that happens I mean, we've all been, I mean, not all of us, but you know, like most of us have experience with parents or with siblings, and you can see the difficulty of being able to be a parent. Like it's a hard job. And to add on top of that, all the things that he needs to push forward with the airbenders, it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like that never.
Not to mention the age gap of the characters. Like we assume like Boomy's about like what 10 or so years older than.
Oh yeah, he's much older. Yeah.
Like Tenzin. So if like Tenzin's 8, like suddenly Boomy's 18, does he actually want to go on these like trips? You know, what's Boomy doing during this time? Like they didn't give the specifics, but like you get the point that they're kind of going for. Just like it wasn't perfect because they had celebrity parents.
Right. And that's
That's
actually an
the
interesting
kind of
thought. I wonder why it took them so long for the second child. I'm sure, and that's kind of the reason why Tenzin and Lin didn't really work out, or at least that's the reading I get from it, is that part of it was like a kid thing, because Lin she's not into kids, she didn't want kids, and like Tenzin's like, well, I kind of have to have kids because of the situation I'm in, and I feel like that was one of the factors. I mean, there could have been like obviously other factors, but I feel like that was one of the key ones that broke them apart. But yeah, it's interesting to me that they would be that far apart, because I would think that they would want to try again, soon after, and that'd be an interesting storyline if they ever do want to cover that. And I like, and that's the thing, I like the idea of these more adult storylines that they did with Legend of Korra, and what possibly could be done with the new movies now, and something that I think Mike and Brian do very well in terms of at least presenting the ideas, even if the ideas don't always like go over very well with the fan base. I like the attempts at what they do, and getting these more adult storylines where you like, even Toph, like, it's kind of like, I didn't really get married, but I was, I had two different fathers, who for my daughters and that kind of thing. Like, that's like cool, like, just to have, and not being a big thing either. It's just like, oh yeah, this happened, versus it being like a, whoa, you did this thing. Like, I actually really appreciate doing that. Now, I know another big part of contention, and then Matt is going to be on one side, and I'm not even sure how Morgan feels about this, but the severing of the past lives. I'm gonna let you start off, Matt, on your thoughts on it, because I think, yeah, you have the heavier thoughts, I think, on this one.
Yeah. I think most people would probably agree with me, but I hate it. I hate the concept of it. I like what it does thematically, like in terms of Korra's character arc and everything, but like just the concept of having the past lives not there anymore is terrible. I hate that. It's just from a pure fan's perspective, like, you've just robbed yourself of so many potential future storylines that you could do, or potential future, like, fan servicey moments with, like, talking to the past avatars and all that kind of stuff. It's from a pure fan service perspective. Why would you do this? Though character wise, I understand it, because it helps Korra to, like, become her own person, not be so focused on the past all the time, and not be so reliant on Aang, which was a big part of her character in book 1. So, like, that's cool, I guess, sure, but, like, still, no.
Yeah, so for me, in terms of the past lives, I really enjoyed that moment. I was like, oh my god, there is consequences, and they're actually following through on those consequences. Because we always heard from all these other times, like, if you're in the Avatar state and this happens, if you're in the Avatar state, this happens, if you're in the Avatar state, this happens. They're like, oh, finally, we see like the big consequence of it happening. And then for me, because I've heard that a lot from the fan base, is that yeah, you don't have all you can talk to is Korra now, like, going forward. And that the idea that you're losing sight on all these past lives. For me, I always like, well, we have like 200 other, avatars stories that we've not heard of, that where you can have that storyline of, like, the looking back sort of thing. But of course, you don't get like the fan servicey part, because you don't get like fan favorites like Kyoshi, Roku anymore. You don't get Aang. But for me, I was like, well, if you really want that specific storyline, you can get that from these older stories, which I still think they need to do that. I think they need to like go in the middle of the timeline somewhere, and where they can just do like a whole lot of like different stuff. So for me, this is where I have a huge disconnect with the fan base, because it never was a huge significant loss for me in the story. Yes, obviously, but not in terms of like us being robbed of future stories. Like, when we get this next Earth Avatar series, I don't think it's going to be a significant loss not having the past lives, because even at the end of book 3, it was the lesson almost was, hey, thank you, Paz, for being a member for 26 months. The lesson was kind of like, hey, sometimes you don't want to even listen to the past, you know what I mean? Like I didn't even listen to any of the advice. Even Young Chin, I was like, yo, I don't even agree with you. So I don't know. For me, it never like super bothered me. For me, I felt like if you wanted those stories, you still can get those with older avatars. Like, if you want to get a Zito storyline, then you can see him, looking in his past lives and having that like storyline. But again, and I also want them to hold on to their guns, but I feel like there is something that could happen where they have the Earth Avatar, like, reconnect the past lives, which, okay, if that's the case, then like whatever. But at the same time, I'm like, no, stick to your guns, Mikey Brian. I appreciated that big swing you took. But I feel like I'm very much in the minority in that, in being like super into that big swing. Morgan, how about you?
Yeah, I've never really had a problem with it. Like I get the point. Like the past lives, connecting with the past lives is always a huge moment. Like when it happens, like people want it to happen. But I do get the sense like people want it to happen like a little bit too often than not. Like with some people in the fandom, you like they just want like a running conversation with a past life to go on like at all times. When actually the Yang Chen novels that you referenced like do a really good job of kind of highlighting like the error of that, in that like there is limitations to talking to the past avatars because of how like it works. Like they can only give you information based on like their perception of like their own past, and that's cool for like kind of like words of wisdom effectively, but they don't know specifically how to handle the specific situation you're dealing with, and that's what Yang Chen encounters. We even see in like the comics, like Roku doesn't know how to handle the merging of the nations in like the Promise, so like Aang separates connection from him for like multiple books until it kind of reunites again in the Rift. And like it's a plot point effectively that like we're like the Aang era and Korra era are eras of like huge change, and I'm fine with for future eras kind of having this connection not be there, because I think you can do it eventually if you want to. Like there's a way to reconnect it if you absolutely want to do it. I don't mind if they do it or not, but like you say, because the franchise is more than just like 2 shows and going forwards, we have so much room to do past Avatar stuff. Like all the novels mentioning, like going through Yang Chen, Kyoshi, Zito, mentions of like Salai, Goon, all these other avatars that we
or
don't
like the
know
second
about.
Avatar after one, or if you do like a
Yeah.
story about the 4th Avatar, you can see how they were talking to the previous 3. Like I feel like those storylines still can be there if that's like a desire. But I don't know if that's actually what Matt is actually asking for, right? Like you're not asking for like I don't care about these other avatars who I don't know names of, or these like obscure ones. I want to hear about Kyoshi. I want to hear about Roku.
That's not quite what I'm saying. I'm thinking
yeah.
it just more as like it's like a fun cameo. Like, oh, we'll have a Korra movie. She can talk to Kyoshi or something in like a brief scene to get some advice. Like that would just be like, as a fan, that would be really cool. And I think from like I feel like they might try to bring it back, honestly, for like from like a brand synergy standpoint, if that makes sense. Because like they're having this new series coming out, and if if you want to connect this to the past one, you're not going to be able to just do Korra. I feel like the larger fan base would probably be like a little bit apprehensive about that. You might want Aang, especially with this adult gang movie coming out. So I think from like, and if
Or that
you're
could be
casting a
the
voice
solution that
actor
they're
for
doing.
adult Aang in
Like,
the movie, you're gonna
yeah,
maybe
they might
want
be
him to come
doing
in,
that. They're doing
cameo in the show.
like,
Yeah,
you have it here because we're not doing that going forward or something.
yeah.
Or
So
they'll
like if
do it
they
through
wanted,
like maybe like because I think during that time the technology was good enough that they were no, it was just photos. It wasn't like video yet during Aang's time. Movers weren't a thing until Korra's time. So it's not like you can like look at like old archives of like, oh, this is what Aang was doing during this time period. I mean, that's not part of the discussion. But I was like, oh yeah, the new one. We should talk about like what that could be. I think that was everything. Was that? Did I miss anything like in terms of book 2?
A big one probably is right at the start. A lot of people tend to not like Korra's attitude in the very
Oh
early
yeah, that's
episodes.
something that I agree with. Is that I felt that she had to she reverted a little bit. Like they had like a little bit of a reboot. And I think Matt, you had the same thing too. Is that you felt like she also got rebooted back to like season 1 Korra. Like wait, what about the lessons you learned? Yeah,
she definitely does, but I could definitely see I could see why, and it might be a bit of a stretch, but like just the way she got her bending back last season is kind of like, oh, I'm awesome. I lost my bending and I got it back because I'm awesome. So she's like all arrogant again because of that. She gets one victory and just kind of she's given an inch takes a mile. You know what I mean? So that's why she's so like arrogant.
I actually like that new perspective that you gave, because you said that. Well, maybe it does make sense that she reverted back because because she was given her powers like at the end. She's like, oh, I'm good now. I defeated like the greatest enemy I'm probably ever gonna have in Amon. Like, what's the next thing I have to do? Yeah, and I actually recontextualizing like that did actually help me in terms of like enjoying it more, in that I can understand the arc a little bit, because it's like, oh yeah, she did have where she should have been, but then because she has that confidence now, especially it's represented with that first race she has with the kid, and they're like, hey, no fair, don't use the Avatar state to like give yourself a boost, or using it so nonchalantly. And so yeah, I actually really like that take you had, because it made me recontextualize that aspect of Korra and the revert.
For me, it's one that like I've never been like a super fan of, because I get it, like she is frustrating in a way in some of those scenes to kind of watch, but I do think a lot of times it is forgotten in a way, like why she is that way. That
Yeah.
like everyone ignores, like, and almost forgets, like, Tenzin and Todrock have been lying to her like for her whole life, and it's
Yes.
a huge plot point from book one that she was held back from being the Avatar, and she learns about it like 13 years later, and they said it was Aang, but it wasn't. And then Unalaq pops in at the exact moment to kind of manipulate her down a specific path, but also specifically as like mentors, her father and Tenzin have arcs to go on themselves. Like
Hmm.
the way the plot resolves itself, Tenzin admits he was not a good mentor to her at the start of this book. Tonraq apologizes to her for his behavior because he basically tells her to be like, don't interact with the spirits
Hmm.
because of his own like past actions. Like he tells the Avatar not to be the bridge between the worlds, and then Tenzin, who actually isn't spiritual, is still going along attempting to be her spiritual guide, even when Unalaq is like right there. And you can sort of see that like both of you I think mentioned like arrogance, and it almost feels like I would apply the arrogance more to those two than Korra, because I think Korra is trying to be the best Avatar that she can be because she's proven herself from what she did in book one, and she lets it go to her head, I think, to like a little bit, but I don't think like arrogance is necessarily what I would frame early Korra as. I think she's like brash because she wants to get involved and like solve things
She
like
wants to do
immediately.
good. Yeah, like
Yeah.
she always has that component. I think it
Mm.
also does get lost because yeah, if you do just say arrogance, bratty, then you're losing that aspect of Korra. In that no, she's really just wanting to help, and she does that, maybe in a very aggressive manner, but like it's from a good
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, like the basic idea is like Korra is the Avatar who always wanted to be the Avatar, but kind of gets hindered from being the Avatar.
Hmm.
Because like one of the big things is they don't tell her about the spirit attack. They don't tell the Avatar about like an obvious point the Avatar should know about. Like they're completely controlling how she is as the Avatar, rather than like assisting her. And that's why I like Unalaq in early book one, book two, because he comes in and like knows exactly how to play it because he's immediately like with the title Avatar Korra, like hello, I respect you,
Right.
and
True.
she likes that because the others haven't quite gotten to that point, and it takes the entire book for Tenzin and Korra's relationship to get there.
That was a big revelation I had in rewatching book two when it had the Netflix drop, and that I was like, wait a minute, why were people mad at Korra at the beginning with siding with Unalaq? Because yes, as you said at the beginning, she had every reason to like go with this guy. Like obviously we know in hindsight, oh, that was the bad guy. Obviously he was the bad guy. But it's like in that situation, no, yeah, she was not being heard from Tenzin or getting poor advice from Tenzin and her father. So yeah, when I rewatched that sequence and I saw that, I was like, no, it makes sense that Korra would have done this. Like that portion, that specific beat, no issue with that one at all.
It's even a nice scene with like her mother, where we get the kind of Avatar parent perspective on it, and that like, we just wanted you to have a normal childhood, and her response is, I never wanted a normal childhood. Like I wanted to be the Avatar. That was her like debut scene, bursting through the wall. Like the second she knew she had kind of multiple elements, that she knew that's what it was and wanted it, and it's that kind of moment of like her parents finally accepting we need to let you do your job, but her being like, I understand your perspective. I'll never not need my parents, and it's the only time we get to see Avatar parents as well. So it's
Oh,
a
true.
really
Yeah,
pretty
we
big
don't
deal.
get that much at all. Yeah, you're right. Same with siblings too. I don't know if that's like going to be a continual thing that they're going to keep doing. Is like, yeah, no, if you're an avatar, you don't have siblings, like for whatever. Because so far we have not had anyone had a sibling. Maybe Rava's just like, nah, like I can't, I can't do this twice. Okay, however that works, however that magic works. Do we just skip book three because I don't know if anybody ever has like, or have you guys ever heard like major critiques for book three ever? Like I don't think I've ever even really heard
Well,
much of anything.
the obvious one that I always bring up is that like I do think of all the villains, like the Red Lotus kind of basically are the most underdeveloped ones because it's four characters plus an entire group, and you don't really get much with the Order of the White Lotus as well.
Yeah,
Like
which would be
we
nice because
learn,
that like, they're
yeah,
directly tied to the Red Lotus, and you don't ever get like an interaction.
yeah. So it's like we learn two things exactly about Gazan. We learn two or three things about Pali, one or
Mingwa,
two about
almost
Minghua.
nothing. Yeah.
Even Tenzin, Zahir, they're not still super clear on what like is going on with him, given that he's the leader of the group, and that's the only reason like I don't like overly rate like book three like super highly compared to the others myself, is that I think the villains are like important to be well developed, and I didn't quite get that from them. Like they're cool in terms of their powers. Obviously, they create like the potential for some of the best fights in the series, and the concept is
That's
interesting in terms
true.
of the Red Lotus breaking off. But I definitely wanted more. The main thing I think is just I needed to know why each member of this group was part of this group
Yeah, I was
and
gonna say that. I
adhered
think
to
we
this
needed that.
ideology.
We needed a Red Lotus alone situation, right? Because we don't actually know the ideology. We only know the strong ideology of Zahir, which maybe that's the case, right? Like he has the strong head. He's the strong head
Yeah.
of that group. But also, might want to hear from the others. Like, what do they even think? Like, obviously they believe in him, but for what reason? Like, I would have liked to have like maybe you could have had maybe a scene with like Kazan and Bolin when they're talking, maybe when they're in lock with each other about their philosophies or why he believes in Zahir, why he's following him to the ends of the world. It would have been nice
Yeah.
to hear a little bit about that. Or even when Pali came in to when he was, of course, talking about Guru Lahima, when they were about to do the handoff, the switch off on the peak. And they had their little conversation. Even that would have been nice. I mean, she talks about a little bit of her past, like, oh, thank you for saving me from like the warlord and all that kind of stuff. I always appreciate you. But like even hearing some of her own philosophy, like we didn't get because again, Matt, you mentioned this in your video that because the episodes are so short, you just don't have time to like let the characters just breathe and just, hey, can we just like hear what their thoughts on the situation? It's just always like plot, 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 because that's all the time you have. It's just like we gotta get to the next plot point. How did you feel about like a Red Lotus and that sort of dynamic?
I think they're cool just from like just looking at it like as like just a regular viewer, not even trying to dig any deeper. They're just cool. Like we got a lava bender, we have an armless water bender, and another combustion bender. Like that is objectively cool. If you're an
The
Avatar
design wise,
fan.
they always have great designs for the
Yeah.
characters.
Oh
Like
yeah,
always.
good.
It's very similar to, I forget the gentleman's name who does Final Fantasy VII's like character development. No, something with an N. I can't remember it. But the guy who does Final Fantasy VII, he's actually very, very good at design work. Like so, anytime he has it, but not all the time is his characters always written real well. You always have to pair him with someone else who can like bring that out. But for you, you just were cool. You were like, they're just cool looking dudes. Like that's all I need. I didn't need any
I mean,
more.
I would have liked some character, some
Mhm.
additional character growth in there. I mean, again, you guys mentioned, there's some teases of it here and there. Like there's definitely some opportunity there for like maybe some expanded universe material, like a comic or something about them. But as
There's
a
a whole
concept, it just
storyline
seems
with
like
them breaking up when Zybao, is that the guy who split off
Yeah, the
initially?
Jaiba, yeah, the Order
Yeah,
of the White Lotus. Yeah.
Zybao. Like that's a whole freaking story right there. And you can include Iroh if you want to have like a fan favorite in there. Like there's so much in Avatar that you could
Yeah.
like cover. Like that's interesting, extremely interesting.
Yeah, and book 3 probably has the biggest like kind of tease of an event we don't get to see, the like a kidnapping attempt of Korra in the past, where like
Yeah, like all
like
that.
it was like
Sokka was
an
involved.
Avatar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like that would be a really cool story. I think. I thought that's what the adult teen Avatar could have done. Or maybe it could. Maybe if the first one does well, then they can like keep going on with those storylines. You see that.
Yeah, Jaiba could be in the new movie
Yeah. Oh my god, that would be
because
so
like
cool.
Iroh knew
That
him
would be so
apparently.
cool. Yeah. That kind of stuff is what gets me kind of like giddy, like little small like lore bits like that. What else in book 3? I'm trying to think of. The thing that people seem to like not give Korra credit for is that she was fighting through goddamn poison when she was facing Zahir. Like that seems to be forgotten a lot of times. It's like, she always loses so quickly. I'm like, no, what she did was freaking incredible. Like she was fighting through poison that should have killed her long ago and was still throwing hands. Like I don't know. Like that's a weird critique that I hear in book 3 sometimes.
it's kind of a weird critique you hear kind of for the whole show, where a lot of people just think Korra loses way too often, despite being like this, this physical bending prodigy, which is kind of a understandable criticism in some ways.
Well, and that she's the defeated. Well, let me think. Like Amon, obviously, no one's putting hands on Amon. Like that's just like an anomaly. Unalaq, that one is the weirdest one because I've rewatched that fight scene so many times. Like, what is it that made Korra lose? Like, it just felt like it was like one of those just like sometimes you get lost. It didn't feel like there was like a big thing. I don't know if you guys have revisited that fight scene a lot. But every time I rewatch it, I'm like, why did she lose? Like what happened in that situation? Like I didn't really like fully get it, except for like you got the whole spirit of Fatu thing taking it out. But like that loss always felt weird to me. And I never really like understood that because I hear one freaking poison. Like what do you want her to do? Like what do you want her to do? And then Kuvira again PTSD. Like it, and that's kind of the point of Korra, kind of, is to lose. It's because if you're gonna set up a character to be like, oh, I love bending, like that's like my main identity. Yeah, if you want to challenge that, you're always going to challenge that by having her go through adversity. Um, I don't know. Yeah, like cool. Her losing was cool to me. Like I actually prefer it when my heroes lose versus when they're always like winning. Of course, it is important too to also have victories. Which, by the way, I'm trying to think of what are some major core victories actually in the show.
Book 2 finale. Big
Like
Blue
yeah, I
Korra.
guess when she becomes a spirit, yeah, that the Be Me stuff.
That knee strike.
Wait, which one? Oh yeah, yeah,
The cosmic
that was
knee
a,
strike.
the cosmic knee strike. Yeah, that was pretty killer. I mean, most people don't know. I guess her Hundun fight in the video game.
Yeah.
That was a pretty decisive victory. That game is it's such a fun game. Actually, I'm gonna play it again. I think I should do like an annual replay of that. It's actually a really like the combos you can do in that game. It's like really fun. Anything else in book 3? I'm trying to think of any other like critiques that might pop up. Oh, I guess Zahir's philosophy. Matt, you had like some really cool ideas about like how some people are like will take it to be like, oh, they think he's just a baby anarchist who just wants chaos and doesn't want to actually replace it with anything. That was definitely my initial reading of it. I was always kind of bothered that people were like so into him. I'm like, but he's not. He's just saying chaos. Like he's not actually saying, hey, I'm going to fill this void with something else. Which I don't even think he does. Does he at any point say, yeah, well, when this happens, I will do this thing? Or does he just go?
He alludes to it. I don't know if he outright says it, but he definitely alludes to it when he's talking to Korra at Jybel's Grove. I don't know. I don't remember the line specifically. I'd have to look it up, but something like that, something along those lines.
Well, I think he just said he would want people to govern themselves, right? Which is like the actual
less,
philosophy.
No world leaders.
Yeah, just have people groups. But that's also a form of government too. It's just like state. That's just state government, kind of a situation. So, yeah, that's the critique I would hear is that that the Zahir philosophy was like the way that was presented might have been a little bit too simplified or like reducted. What I think is something you mentioned too in your video too, Matt, is that you said that because they have such short run times, or not run times, but season orders. And they're trying to talk about these big ideas. It's like, yeah, you're only going to get like the simplified version of all of these like thought pieces.
Yeah, it's simplified by necessity because they kind of need to kind of condense it, especially because their audience is probably a little bit younger and probably isn't equipped to like understand all like the real deep stuff. Even Avatar did that as well on some level. That's just kind of a consequence of it being on Nickelodeon. But at the same time, like if you dig deep enough into it, like a lot of the stuff does actually like make sense, and it's deeper than it seems. I think that's definitely a big criticism that a lot of people have for the show as a whole, is that all the villains are kind of rather shallow with their political stuff. And there's a couple big videos going around about that specifically. But yes and no is like the kind of
they did a pretty good job in the foundation and explaining it as much as they could within the 12 episode, 13 episode, spreads. But yeah, I hope that too. I hope they get more episodes. I mean, in the streaming era that we're in now, everything seems to be just short order. But it'd be great if Avatar Studios would allow there to be, for this new Earth Avatar, to give them another like 20 episodes like we had in the past. I think that would very much benefit the series.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The other thing with like the book 3 and like Zahir's kind of philosophy is that it is sort of the one book that like Korra, like they don't really have kind of Korra reflect that much on like kind of quote unquote what she learns from this villain, because when they discuss it together, the core point is just like Zahir's like, I want to basically eliminate all the world leaders, and Korra's like, I don't really like the world leaders, but I'm not going to kill them. And then they're just at conflict with each other. Like you can see what she kind of learns in a way from like Amon. It's quite clear what she learns from Unalaq because of the spirit portal decision. They do the comparison between the two, like she's actually quite similar, but maybe down a slightly different path to Kuvira. But the whole kind of freedom, how she feels about the world leaders plot, doesn't come up as much, even though you have the Earth Queen plot in early book 3, where she doesn't like Hu Ting, but like, and that's where they didn't get into like the nuance of like what Zahir like truly wanted, where it just felt like no world leaders, do what you want, and it just is the riot that we got basically.
I think that's it for book 3. I don't think there's any other other things that like I think necessarily get like overhated. And again, just a preface for anyone who might just be joining in now because how someone's saying like I think it's appropriately hated. What I'm saying is that there are things that should be critiqued. There are things that are flawed. But I think that when we overblow it, when it becomes this whole thing about being like the worst, then you overshadow these things that the show does do well. Like if you're spending all your time, perfect quote, Matt. It's the Iroh quote, right? Like if you look for the light, you'll oftentimes find it, but if you look into the dark, that's all you'll ever see. I feel like that's a lot of some of the core fan base is that if you're only going to look for the bad, sure, by all means, you are going to find it, but like if you try to look for the light, you will fucking find that shit too, and you'll find a pretty decent show under there. All right, so book 4, main things that are levied. I guess giant mech would be like the main thing that comes to mind that I think about when even then I don't really care so much about it. Like if people seem just by the basis of it just say no, there's a giant mech, I'm out. Like I don't know, like it doesn't matter to me necessarily. But I think I don't know how you guys feel about the giant mech stuff and like the technological aspect of it.
The giant mech is like, it is probably technology taken too far in Korra. Like I think that's kind of fair to say. It's a leap, I think, just a bit too far. It's too big. It's just like I get you need a big thing for the finale, but like it's just a bit over the top. To the point where like in the new Republic City RPG book, there's actually a section that describes how to play the game with mechs, and they're basically like, please don't involve giant mechs in your story. This was a one-off thing. Please stick to the small ones. So it kind of highlights that, never again until crazier technology. But the actual technology with regards to like the spirit vine technology, I think is actually a really cool thing in book 4, because you have a spirit wilds in Republic City now. Mm-hmm. That's clearly where the technological advancements are actually going to come from. Is that sort of an energy source? That's what makes kind of the Avatar world different than the real world, is that they have that spirit source. But how do the spirits feel about that? And that's a pretty cool dynamic. It allowed for an interesting Varric plot where he reflected on like, is this okay that I did this? And he now doesn't support spirit vine research. So that's kind of all fine. Like I appreciate that like Kuvira used technology to be so dominant, because that's kind of the Fire Nation way. That's how they did it. So it's just like it's kind of like tiny percentage marks off for the giant mech, but it's not like a book destroyer type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like when it's like everything sucks now, it's like I didn't like it. I would not have made the same choice, but it's not like terrible to me. I treat it the same way that I think of Koizilla in a way. It's just like it's just a momentary like thing. But I can't think of much else in terms of like book 4, because I feel like once people get to book 3 and book 4, that's when they start like generally in the fan base like start like collectively being like, we like that stuff. Kuvira, I don't really hear too much except for maybe like her ending, like her end arc. I
don't think Kuvira's fleshed out as much.
Right, like either. I feel like that she needed that core Kuvira alone episode. Like I think that definitely was needed.
Like I think it's actually like a kind of relatively like big like lot of stuff that we miss with Kuvira, because she was introduced in book 3, and they never really go into a lot of detail about how she basically has a full like villain turn. In that it comes down to like one scene between her and Su Yin where it's just like, why don't you want to take over the world? Oh, I'll do it. And it's just like, so okay, I'll do that. You almost forget that like it's adopted mother-daughter here, like because Su Yin is just like, I will kill her now.
Right. And Matt, you made a good point about that too, about like her just like, changing face. Like, you're not actually my family, then you're my enemy. If you're not with me, you're my enemy.
Yeah, that's definitely more in. I would say that's more in service of Su Yin than it is Kuvira, but like, it's definitely part of her vibe is that she's very hypocritical when it comes to her family. She's down for her blood family any day, but Kuvira, she ain't blood, so she don't count. So it's kind of a nice little piece of irony there.
Yeah.
And that too, I was gonna say, I just really like the dynamic, but this is more about like not like what's done really well. Part of it is, but Su Yin and Lin, I felt like that was done really well. I know people, that could be it. Maybe some of the Toph stuff, in the flashback stuff. But no, actually, wasn't that flashback stuff in book 3? That was book 3, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh my goodness. kind of pass that up. The idea that Toph does better. Although I always would have suspected. So I actually do think that Toph is not actively a bad parent, but a bad parent. And that's kind of what you would expect from the character. Like I don't think she was ever going to be a nurturer or anything like that, or very good at, because she herself is also pretty stubborn, you know, in her mentality. That I was more okay with, I think, that critique than the Aang critique, because that's kind of in line, I think, with Toph, at least for me.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that a character who has had a long history of parental issues would also grow up to be like maybe not so great of a parent.
Right. Yeah, so I forgot that we hadn't mentioned that, because I forgot. Oh, yeah, that's a book 3 component. Because Toph herself shows up in book 4, but her past self, adult version of herself was there. But yeah, it was Kuvira, Big Mac. I can't really think much else in terms of book 4 that was like heavily critiqued, or that I would say was like overhated.
Like I know like people tend to be kind of a bit weird on Wu. Like I personally think like Wu is like a bit like, oh no, who's this character at the start? But like they save him at the end, and then like I think in Ruins of the Empire they actually do some really good stuff with Wu. So I think thanks to Mako in a way, like he gets a bit of an arc to help Wu become a better like leader, and so they kind of save that one at the end. But he can be a little annoying at the start. Like he maybe takes up a little bit too much screen time when it's a book where like we're waiting for the team to get back together, and you know you have to wait until halfway through the season for that to happen, and you wanted a bit more of the reunion basically. So yeah, like I don't hate Wu or anything like that. I think they did some good stuff with him, but it's something I see around the place a decent bit.
Yeah, he's definitely an acquired taste, that's for sure.
Yes, no, for sure. Mako, that's something that I think about a lot with book 4. I totally felt that he should have died in that sacrifice. Like I really thought that's what was building up to, like the music swelling, you know, the whole thing. Especially because, and maybe I was overcorrecting, because I felt like he didn't really have much going on in that book, and towards the end of the series, like he didn't have much going on. So I was like, oh, that's a cool thing for him to have going on. Just like, you know, this big sacrifice. That's something that I know I wanted in that moment, and I thought it was kind of stolen. I was like, oh, well, he just got picked up by Bullet, you know, kind of a thing, and it almost felt like an afterthought, even in the way that it was staged. That when Bowling kind of like, oh, hey, let's just put a shot real quick, pull him out of the thing, and then he's cool. I don't know how you guys felt about that Mako scene, and if you felt that, you know, he should have bit it.
I think if they'd committed to killing him, it would have been the writers kind of admitting that they just like kind of ruined the character in the second half.
Oh, dang, yeah.
So I think they needed to keep him alive to like actually do something with him, because like they had set up the idea that like I think he's going to be like chief of police in the future in Republic City. I think it's clear that that's probably going to happen at some point.
That's his arc right now. Yeah.
And like he has this kind of clear path. They set up the idea of like he is like the most loyal supporter of like Korra at this point. Like that's where they kind of position Mako at the end. Like he would do anything for the Avatar. That's like the approach that they're doing. And that's why like people really want to see this Mako comic, to see what they do with him up next, and to give him a little bit more of a maybe solo arc. But yeah, like I think killing him off would have been a mistake. Like again, you could have made it a hugely emotional moment where it worked, but I don't think the build-up was there to make it sort of satisfying.
Because I don't think I felt anything for Asami's father dying. Like I'm like, oh, okay, he got swatted. Like that emotional catharsis is what I wanted for Mako. like that squishing is what I wanted. And I was like, oh, I didn't really, because there wasn't really a lot of deaths in book 4. I don't think there's any actually, any major, except for of course Asami's father. Was there?
There's like a lot of implied deaths by the mech as it arrives into the city.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of casualties on that one. Yeah, not in the same way that book 3 like literally had like all of the Red Lotus die except for Zahir, you know, which is and I like that the way that they do death in Legend of Korra, like for example for Police death, like her getting sandwiched in metal, like you know exactly what that should look like, but they didn't do it. It's like the horror film trope, right? Where like you have the horror happening off screen and it's almost worse because your imagination has to fill in the blanks versus you actually seeing like the thing that is happening. Meanwhile, just straight getting electrocuted, like dang, that was like pretty vicious. Like we saw all of that like happen. Kazan, I wish he didn't like go out like that. Like I get it, like he didn't want to go back, and so he's like, I'm freaking pulling this mountain down. I was like, oh man, I wish it was some other way rather than you just like killing yourself. How'd you guys feel about that? Like some of the deaths or non-deaths that happened in the show.
With the Red Lotus, I think it's like I would have like they're impactful deaths because like the police one, it's dramatic. It's like whoa,
Yeah, that one was
that's
really
combustion bending, like imploding in on itself. Like okay,
Yeah.
I get that. I just wish I knew the characters better. Like I think that's what it comes down to. Like police death has an impact because it's what like gives the hero no attachments and allows for the flight technique, which is kind of an interesting one. But with Gazan, it would have been really interesting if we knew like what the backstory was with him in terms of like the whole idea of like they support Zahir, so they ultimately
Right.
want freedom. So
Mhm.
what was his thing with freedom? And like the one interesting bit of his backstory where they mentioned that like he was raised by an older sister, and it's like what's going on there? Like what happened to the
Yeah,
sister?
there was
Like,
a
is
lot
there-
that they could have touched on that would have been
Yeah.
very nice, you know.
yeah, there's that, and then like with Ming Hua, it's like like she was like because we got confirmation she was born with no arms. It wasn't that something
Right, yeah,
happened
born
to
with no
her.
arms, yeah. Mhm.
So how did she do her training? Which tribe is she from? Was it Unalaq who recruited her? Because effectively, like she's unique because it's basically kind of like psychic waterbending she's doing.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, no,
so,
basically.
so like it's that sort of stuff. It's just like the deaths are impactful because it's like they're killing characters in these action scenes, and it's like Mako gets to fully defeat someone like that. That's an interesting scene.
Oh yeah,
The
Mako
brothers
has a
together.
straight kill. Yeah, he has a kill.
Yeah, the brothers together like overwhelm Gazan. That's a cool moment for those two. So the fights are great. It's just like they could have taken it to the next level with better development for the characters. Is kind of the core idea, I suppose.
Yeah, I think in that vein, I think Amon's death, Amon and Tarlok's death, that's like, I think that's, I mean, I personally don't like it that much. I think it's a bit like, overdone, like oversold a little bit. It's a little
What, you mean the
melodramatic,
explosion or
but
whatever?
yeah, where they like the murder suicide.
Yeah.
I think it's a little oversold, but like it's definitely the most effective death, like emotionally speaking, because we actually like know the backstory of those characters as opposed to like
Yeah.
the Red Lotus or
For
anything else.
sure.
We have an actual reason to care about them, and it's definitely like it's a very bittersweet scene, I guess you could say, with like they're like kind of reminiscing, like we're back at it. No, we're not.
He's like, nah, dude, we can't be in this life.
Yeah.
Wait, I forget
The cursed family.
Yeah, I forgot. Yakon ends up dying in old age, right? Is my assumption.
I believe.
Yeah,
so.
he basically is like depressed, loses
Right, yeah,
all
and
will to like live effectively because his ambitions he feels won't be fulfilled, and
Right.
they just say he died shortly afterwards, kind of type.
Oh,
thing.
got it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. But yeah, book 4. I don't think there's any much else. I think I don't think anyone ever had like a big issue with Toph. I think people really enjoyed seeing Toph again. Although I will say I think it's overstated, like how well she would have done against Kuvira. Especially people don't like point out the fact that she said that her back hurt and that I think she can't like sustain a long-term fight. But that's just me. Like I think the Toph can sometimes combatively get overblown.
Yeah, like Toph doesn't become like Boomy kind of in old age. She doesn't.
Right. Oh,
she's not quite.
Boomy. There's something. Going back to what you're saying about Mingwall and her psychic bending, it's kind of like what Boomy was doing almost, because he's like, well, they didn't cover my face, like I can still bend with my chin,
Yeah.
And that's kind of what probably a lot of what Mingwall is doing. It's a lot of maybe just like a lot of her shoulders, doing helping with that bending. And I think that would be cool. I don't know if they will do this or not going forward, but like if something like that is trained over and over, can you develop psychic bending? Like combustion bending is kind of psychic bending in a way. What she was doing is borderline psychic bending. Like I would like to see like possibly like an evolution, and I know they like to do that. They like to like add abilities like in this world, and that's something I wouldn't mind, like seeing like psychic bending. I don't know, have you guys ever thought about that, like psychic bending, or like the idea of like that development, or is that like, oh, that's too much, like don't go that far, stick with the martial arts?
But
Yeah,
it's already
I
like
definitely think it's
established.
going a little too far, personally. The whole appeal of it, at least to me, let me admit the whole appeal, but part of the appeal of it to me is the fact that it is martial arts. It's very, very rooted in that kind of cultural stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like to take that away is it's taking a huge part of this franchise's identity away.
Yeah, like to me, like once they do it like kind of like carefully, where they treat it as like this character is like particularly skilled, special, to be able to kind of train to this level, like the Yukon family thing that they can do.
And there should be a detraction too. Like there should be a penalty. Like it shouldn't just be like, oh, you just do it because you train at it real hard. Like if you do it like very similar to like the Zahir stuff, like oh, if you need flight, it means you have to detach yourself, like from the entire world. Like there should be like this big, if they do something crazy, like whatever crazy ability they might come up with.
Yeah.
I just feel like, sure, yeah, but just make sure there's some sort of like detraction to it, so it's not just like all rainbows and daisies. But yeah, in terms of book 4, I don't think there's much else that I personally think that's overhated. Like that I'm like it overshadows what is done well in the show that hasn't been covered. Unless there's anything you guys can think of, I don't think there's anything.
Like it's probably just more of a general series thing, but like just maybe like Asami's development, kind of in a similar vein to like Mako.
Like
just like
Asami, that's a thing. That's a thing too. I forgot. Of course, duh. That is just because, and we may get into this about like the production woes of Korra, and that a lot of that was supposed to be more obvious, but it just wasn't because of like the time period, and the heads of Nickelodeon were very conservative about like those relationships being shown. It's unfortunate. Like I think that in particular, I think everybody understands that like it's just an unfortunate circumstance, and we would have wanted to see it played out like more intimately and not just like a handhold at the end and then like a what was that kind of thing, and having to have them confirm it like on a Twitter post later and being like, oh no, yeah, they're together. It just was, that whole thing was just very awkward. I don't know how you guys ever felt about Kasami.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. Nickelodeon are the kind of the real villains here.
Yeah, in that situation.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I think my opinion has always sort of been that I wish they had made it like a little bit clearer. Like in my mind, like it's clear what they're going for. Like I didn't need to be told by Mac and Brian that like that's the direction they were heading in. But like what they like explain of like they pushed harder like last minute and kind of maybe realized actually if we pushed harder a little bit earlier, maybe we could have done a little bit more. That's kind of what they said in their like Tumblr post, kind of like roughly. So it's just that like kind of literally an unfortunate thing of like they just kind of assumed there was a bit more restriction than there actually was. I don't think maybe it would have been enough to fully satisfy everyone at the end, but just little bits that made it more clear. Like there's the blush scene when they reunite, like the letters, but it's maybe a little bit too subtle given that it's like it's two main characters that you're trying to create into a relationship, and it's maybe comes across a little bit like even more subtle because of how like blunt the romance stuff was in the first couple of seasons.
Right.
That we do a complete shift over to like the most subtle like stuff in the series. But like I like what they do in Turf Wars. I like seeing their relationship when it pops up in like the comics, and I of course want to see more happen as we go forward. But I do think Asami needs some more development to kind of help the relationship. Is kind of one of the other.
Totally agree with that one. Definitely want to see more from Asami.
Because like I said earlier, I think that episode 7 moment feels like one of the only true like real like you get to see the emotions of Asami as she makes the decision to choose her friends over her father, like the only member of her family left. I wanted more stuff like that with Asami as we went through, but I think there's room to do it. We just need more content, basically.
Yeah, just a little bit more. And also, someone was saying in the comments earlier, I forgot where it was, saying that the show was like set up to fail, which a little bit it was, because like half of it was like put online, and then half of it was on network television, like towards the latter half of its production. And I think people take that to be like, well, see, the ratings suck. Everybody thinks it sucks, but that's actually not the case. It's because of those production woes. It's because how it's presented. Because literally halfway in the season, they're like not airing on TV anymore. It's going to be online. I forget where the transition was. But I remember that actually happening. Yeah, and the streamer, the Nick streamer was not that good. Like I remember if you like pause, it would like revert back to like the past ad break, so you have to watch the ad break again, and it's really bad experience, right? But if you look at what happened in 2020 when it returned to Netflix, it was top 1 just as long as Airbender was, in terms of it holding that spot and also being in the top 10. I think there was like something like 61 consecutive days of being in the top 10. So this narrative and this idea that there's just no interest out there from the fan base, like just there's no basis for it for me, because if you're trying to say, well, in the original it was this way, it's because of them jerking them around with their air dates. And then when you have something like Netflix where it all just comes out, you know, all at once and you can just binge it, you see then how sustainable and how much interest level was there throughout. So like I am enjoying that the narrative is shifting now. But I don't also want to shift it in the other direction where it's like, oh, it's a perfect show, you know, that kind of thing. We have to always make sure like to be rational and even kilter the entire time. In terms of reception, did you guys revisit it when it came out on Netflix?
Well, for me, it's just like I revisit it like occasionally, just
Often.
because like I do so much content on like Avatar. Like I'm constantly watching bits and pieces of episodes.
Well, I think we had that conversation before that
Yeah.
people assume that we've rewatched it a bunch, but really, yeah, it's the bits and pieces that we are constantly like going back to all the time.
Yeah. Me and the transcript, best friends.
Yes. Oh my God. The wiki transcript is a freaking godsend. The Avatar wiki. Oh my God, Matt. Like how? I mean, you're over here editing 4-hour videos. I'm sure. Like how many times have you gone through?
I usually rewatch both series once a year, but like didn't have time for that this year. Clearly, 2 4-hour videos back to back. That really takes you out of it. So I basically did rewatch it through like clips basically this time, just through editing the video.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, basically once a year I try to watch both of them. So I kind of get like I notice new things every time. I kind of get my opinions change on different things each time. It's definitely good to go into it
every
so
time you
often.
go back, I definitely see new things or have different takes on certain scenes.
Yeah, and especially with Korra, I think Korra versus Avatar is kind of like it's a more interesting show to discuss because I think like everything is solved already with Avatar. Like the discussions are the same, like the opinions are basically the same. But with Korra, it feels like you do a rewatch and it's like, oh, there's this new kind of slight different angle on like book 4 I have now, watching it again, and like maybe I underappreciate this one this time, appreciate this one this time. So like I think that's always the interesting part about Korra is that like the Netflix resurgence has helped, I think, change things from being kind of quite bad situation for the reception of Korra to, oh, like here's the comeback a little bit, and then like there's a further one on the 10-year anniversary in 2022, and I think you kind of see that happen now these days. Of like this month on Twitter, it's the negative run of things. This month, it's the more positive view on Korra, and it's becoming a little bit more balanced, I think.
Right. Yeah, all I'm really asking for is consistency.
I've seen it at its worst. It's definitely gotten better. That's
it's not the what is it that video that shall not be named. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're long on from that. You know, things are like a little bit more rational. Even I think Hello Future Me, who I didn't watch those videos. I think he did like a fixing blah 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 seasons of Legend of Korra. I think that one's supposed to be like more even kills or two. I probably need to watch that one as well. But yeah, I think that's it. Unless you guys in the comment, was there anything that we missed that you wanted us to discuss? I'll look to the comments over like the next like minute or so just to make sure there wasn't anything that was missed that you wanted to say. Wait, I hate it. Oh, okay, like someone right here. Like I hated season 2, and that was the thing too. I actually enjoyed season 2 more than my second run through. I think the first time I watched it, I didn't have like I wasn't in the camp of being like, oh my god, I absolutely hated it. But I don't think I was like super like big on it. I enjoyed it a lot more my second time for sure. When it was on Netflix. Yeah, this guy here, Eddie, says hated season 2 until I watched it again this year. Now I love it. I think that happens a lot. Like when you have like and also when there's a lot of expectations tied to something, and you want it to be a certain way, you're watching it with the expectations, right? But then when you watch it the second time, where you're just taking it for what it is, then I think that it can be appreciated more. Well, this has nothing to do with the actual thing, but yeah, JC and Jinshu are very awesome villains. Yeah, or on the latter, I will agree. Have you read, Matt? Have you read?
I haven't gotten to read them yet. No.
Read the Kyoshi books.
I'll get to it eventually.
The literal best villain is in that book, man. Literal best villains are in that book, man. So interesting. Have you talked about the sudden return of airbenders in book 3? Yeah, we touched on that a little bit. I said that I'm not super fan of that, but like at the same time, as I hear, so I guess I can forgive it because of that reason. How'd you guys feel? I don't think I actually like positioned that question to you guys though. How'd you guys feel about the reemergence of airbenders in book 3?
It's one of those ones where like there's always going to be a little bit of like frustration about like harmonic convergence ends up kind of doing a lot of things like because it's just like it does this and this and this, and it's related to all these other things. Um, I don't mind it too much because like it makes sense like in kind of in the name harmonic convergence, and how do you restore the world back to harmony? You need to add more airbenders. It creates a bit of an interesting dynamic about like, oh cool, so does this kind of like it creates this like energy wave that like turns people into benders, and how does that relate to like energy bending and what the line turtles actually do in terms of just the kind of like more technical aspect of what happens there. But like I like it because I think it's a really strong arc in book 3 and 4 for like Tenzin, Jinora, Kai, Opal, like all those like cool airbender characters on that side of the story that we kind of didn't focus on as much. They're really strong. Like Jinora is probably like the third or fourth best developed character in the show in many ways.
You said Korra herself, right? Wait, or did you say who?
I said Jinora there.
Jinora, sorry about that. Yes, yeah, and especially her airbending abilities in particular too. Yeah. Oh, here's a I think this is a good way to transition because I think we got through most everything. I hope the next Earth Avatar doesn't go through what Korra went through, and I hope they give it a chance. How do you guys think going forward the perception of Avatar will generally be? I think there's going to be excitement. I think people are going to be into it. I think we are actually in a good place in terms of like that excitement and the way that people interact with both Airbender and Legend of Korra, and with all the new material like the books. And I mean, I really want a super stellar video game as well. But the comics, I feel like are kind of a mixed bag so far. But yeah, in terms of like where the fan base is now, how do you think we collectively will be taking the new Earth Avatar in particular?
I think that overall, people who are kind of already fans of Avatar are obviously going to like it for the most part, more or less. As for like the general public, I've definitely seen a lot of like, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just what I've seen, but I've definitely seen a lot of people who are very apprehensive about a lot of the new stuff coming out. I am as well, to a much lesser extent, but like as like I've seen people like non-fans who were like, yeah, they tried making a sequel already with Korra, that didn't work out too well, so they're very like apprehensive about them like kind of expanding the franchise. And I can definitely see that in some ways because it's definitely getting like increasingly more corporate. Like they're definitely trying to push it really hard. It's kind of like this whole like kind of like their Star Wars essentially, where it's like
yeah, Paramount came out and said that they're like, hey, we're done with making original stuff. Like they literally said it in a conference call. They're like, we're done with original stuff. Let's give us more SpongeBob, more Airbender was part of that, and it was one other franchise that are like they're just focusing on those things. Which I was like, as an Avatar fan, I'm like, cool. But like also as like someone who does like original stories, I'm like, oh, well, that sucks. But what do you guys think would have to happen? What do you think? What was the series need to have or depict for it to be well received? Sorry, Morgan, you were gonna say something before that point, though.
Oh, just in terms of like how I think it will be received, I think it just comes down to like different groups of fans. Like yeah, hardcore fans are just gonna want new content because like of the people who like read all the books and comics and stuff like that, they want more comics, they want more novels, and any new content to add to the universe because there is so much to flesh out. Like there's thousands of years before like Avatar Zeta that we don't know about. So there's so much room to work with without even like connecting it to either end. Like go right in the middle, like 3,000 years post one. Like you have so much to work with. So you can do kind of anything there. But I do think there's always going to be a sense of fans who are always just like the original thing was their thing, and they'll for whatever reason never like anything after that. Like in Transformers, it's like they're G1ers. They only like Transformers G1, even though there's like a million other iterations. It was only ever G1. And I think the same thing's kind of going to happen to Avatar. We already see it. Some people are just like ATLA.
Just people in their factions.
Yeah,
because even you have that with Star Wars right now. You have people who are in their sequel trilogy faction, the original trilogy faction, Clone Wars faction, which is kind of separate from the prequel trilogy faction. You know, it's like there's overlap, but it's also separate. You know, the Dave Filoni faction, the Kathleen Kennedy faction. You know, like it's just really fractured, right? But yeah, I just like all things Avatar. Like I think foundationally, I think it's just a really awesome concept, awesome show. I think it's filled with very awesome characters. And ideas. Like I just like the ideas that are presented in it, and that's what I'm hoping for, that they continue. And I just really like Mike and Brian as creators. Sometimes I do think they do need more Oh, here's the big thing that you hear all the time, right? The Aaron Ehas argument, right? They're like, oh, they needed him. That's the reason why the rest sucked, right? But then I also turn and I say, like, well, Dragon Prince isn't like stellar either. What I think is that they need to be together, and I think more teamwork in the industry should be positioned or put on a pedestal versus like the one star that people think that is on that team. Like I think it's like, no, collectively you should want that whole crew to be working together, not them being like separate. I really like what they do with their stories, like or at least in terms of the things that they at least attempt, even if those attempts aren't always fully realized. I do like them making those big swings, presenting these new ideas. They've always done that consistently, and I've always appreciated them as creatives for that. Particularly Brian in particular. Like I really would love to like talk with him at some point. People always ask me like, oh, which voice actor would you want to meet and stuff like that, and like, oh, would you want to like talk to Toph or do the Janet Varney or whatever. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I really want to talk about to the creatives. I want to be like in their minds, like figure out how they think and how they come up with like everything that they do. So any final thoughts from you two in terms of like the future about Korra being overhated?
We're definitely seeing we're definitely seeing a bit of a shift. It's definitely becoming more favorable these days, and I feel like as time goes on, as younger fans start coming into it, we're probably going to get a little more of that for sure.
Yeah, I think we might see the surprise. Like, I like Avatar and Korra, but I'm not the fan of this new stuff, which is a bit of a surprise.
It's
like,
inevitable. It's going to happen.
That's a little bit of what happened with the sequel trilogy, right? Where it's like collectively the original trilogy and prequel trilogy actually were coincide together because like we both hate the sequel trilogy, kind of a thing. And I think for me, I'm just gonna be like, I like aspects of this one. Like I think, and that's the thing too. I think while overall I can still say I enjoy Airbender more than Korra, I still take it from elements, right? I'm like, well, there's certain elements that Korra did better, and there's certain, and I think that's what I'll do with this new series too, is that I'll probably just like, oh, I really like this new setting because I know that's a big contention right now. It's like, oh, the setting's going to be like, it might be like the future or whatever. I'm like, I'm kind of interested to see what that might be. I might be okay with that, or I might like, the way they deal with Team Avatar. That might be different than from what they did with Kyoshi's Team Avatar and Team Avatar Korra's. Because I think it's more healthy to interact something like that, but it's harder, right? Because especially when you're like online, you have to be like, I'm this team, or like I'm on this side. You always have to like pick a side. Which for me, I'm always like just like bits and bits from there. It's a balancing act of what you like versus it being like super harsh dichotomy. But yeah. Thank you guys for coming out again. I want you guys to plug yourselves. Let them know where you're coming from, where they can find you. Matt, go ahead.
You can find me at youtube.com/MattCMG, at Twitter at MattCMGYT. I'm on Threads too. That new Instagram Twitter, whatever that is, that nobody uses.
Yeah, they use it for like 3 days and then gone.
But yeah, I'm on that. I got videos cooking. It's gonna be good. I got some good stuff cooking.
Right, because you do Avatar weeks, right? Like you always change your
I used to do like I don't really do it anymore because this was kind of my sign off essentially. Like I'm not gonna do the yearly thing anymore. I'm just gonna do them whenever I want now. But yeah, I used to do like Avatar month where I just like 1 month a year. I'd be like, all right, here's a bunch of Avatar videos. Rest of the year is gonna be other stuff. But yeah, I'm basically on a whenever I want basis for Avatar stuff now. So whenever I get the urge, it'll happen. Otherwise, I do other stuff.
Which is like, what are you doing right now? Like I saw some thumbnail where you're like,
I did a video recently about the whole iDubbbz thing. It was a whole parody of Content Cop from back in the day.
Okay, gotcha.
And I'm working on a video right now about the Kids' Choice Awards. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. So like, and then Morgan, where can they find you?
I'm AirSpeedPrime on YouTube, Twitter. There's a few other places, but they're probably the main two. Obviously, my videos are my main thing. So like I said at the start, I'm currently going through Legacy of Yang Chen, chapter by chapter. I think I have like...
You're in chapter 21, I think, right now, or 22?
No, I think they uploaded 28 today. So
28, okay. So I'm way behind. Yeah.
I think I have, 9 to go? And I have, I think one already recorded. So getting towards the end of that, so that should be, exciting to kind of finish up that. Because it's kind of, for me, I find it to be the best way to go through that much material.
Yeah.
like bit by bit to actually
it's
take in what's happening in each scene. And then the other thing I'm going through at the moment as well, and I'll get back to after Yang Chen, is the Republic City Legends RPG book
Right.
that came out, which actually has a ton of new information on Republic City itself. There's not as much information about the main characters, but like if you want to know about like this district of the city and the characters who like run the different corporations, it goes into that in like an incredible amount of detail. Like going through it, like I think my video on it's like 3 hours long because like there's just so much like depth to the information. Like there's more than in like the core book as well. So it's an interesting one. It's some of the only new Korra material coming out for Korra fans. So definitely pick up that book if you can. And I'll be working on I'm probably going to do like top 20 like interesting moments from the book, the interesting details. I'll do something like that afterwards.
That's good. All right. Well, that is it. Thank you guys for coming out. I'm not going to let you guys be here while I say my goodbyes and stuff like that because it can get kind of boring. But thank you guys for coming out. Definitely check out their channels, y'all. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the next time we talk about some Avatar shit.
Bye.
All right. Bye, guys. Okay, guys. So hold on really quick. I'm just gonna say goodbye to everybody, just because there was a lot of people in here and I missed a lot of your chat. I'm sorry about that. Also, yes, Kyle, I wanted to say that I agree with what you said here. So if the series goes well for Avatar Studios, I theorize that we'll work on our way back to the early concept for Aang for an Avatar, an air Avatar set in a cyberpunk-esque future. Yeah, I think that could very well happen. Because if you guys are not aware, in the original version of Avatar, like when it was being pitched and it was being like theorized of what they were going to make it about, it was very similar to Cowboy Bebop, and that it was going to take place in like the cyberpunk setting. And I think that it'll be basically going back to their roots, kind of, with this Earth Avatar, having it in this like very futuristic. And I'm sure the conflict is going to be like technology versus like magic, because I think for the first time in a large way, we're going to see non-benders being more or less equalized with benders through tech. I mean, that's my theory, that we don't know anything about the new story of the new Earth Avatar, but I think that could be a very big component. Really quick, let me do some shout outs and thank yous to Paz for becoming a member for 26 months. Thank you so much, Paz, for your continued support. I really, really do appreciate that. It helps a lot with this channel. And Paz, also thank you for the donation you did today for the, I don't know what kind of currency that is, the HUF. I know I think that's some European currency, but thank you for the 1,000 whatever that currency is. And also Alex, thank you for earlier today for the $5 that you gave during the stream. I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody as much as I can. See you later, Ice Teaser. See ya, Joe Sunday. Goodbye, Monsieur Le Frog. Jaden Yugi, see you later. Whoops, my bad. Jenna Love, oh, thank you so much for modding today. I saw you in there giving some nice feedback and everything. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you doing that. I hope we don't get less benders. No, I think we'll still have benders, but I think I think there's going to be a big storyline about technology becoming a huge equalizer for the non-bender population. Ninja Mega, thank you for coming out. Thank you for always being in the stream and being very kind. Jaden, see you later. Reginald, thank you for coming out. Pieces. SSJ Group, thank you for always coming out. Always a useful thing. Hey guys, I just arrived. What did I miss? Freaking Morgan. See you later, Morgan. LJ Vids, thank you for coming out. Alan, Alan, no, thank you for coming to the stream and participating. Thank you so much. Yeah, and less spirituality, I think that could be a factor with a lot of the technology. I think there's so many things you actually can do with a future-esque cyberpunk setting in a new Earth Avatar book. I think you can do a lot of theming with that. Hey, see you later. Goodbye. Tokia. Thank you. Decrepit Storm. See you later, Dante. Bye. Ryan, see you later. Oh, it's Hungarian money. Okay, so Hungarian currency. Thank you so much for the 1,000 Hungarian F. I'm not sure what the F stands for. Ron, thank you for coming out. Goodbye. M. Wills, thank you for this live stream. Later to you as well. Yeah, LOL, Morgan. All right, guys. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace, love, and remember, be water, my friends.